in this regard, and that I seem to get all these horrible heart disease genes and maybe not as much. But you can also argue there are cancer bad genes in me that we don't really know about because everybody was dying of heart disease so young. But boy, am I going to control the screening thing.
What source of genetic screening do you recommend to your patients? Because there are a lot of them. There's 23andMe, there's whole genome sequencing available now in a variety of formats.
This is actually one of the questions our research team is working on as we speak. So we're trying to decide. So we do genetic screening for certain things, like ApoE is a gene we want to know in everybody.
For its role in neurodegenerative disease.
Correct. Specifically in Alzheimer's disease. We are selectively using cancer screening in some patients, but in our practice, it's less important because we're generally so aggressive anyway that it turns out to be a little bit moot. We don't learn a lot in the genetic screening that's changing our screening practices because we're so thorough in our family history and we're so aggressive in everybody, regardless of family history. But I think there's a place for these things. For example, if you're looking for reimbursement on certain tests, I'll give you an example, right? So colon cancer historically was not covered by colonoscopy. Screening for colon cancer was not covered until you were 50. That's been bumped to 45. We still think everybody should be screened no later than 40.
No, I haven't had one, so I suppose I should.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm 50 and I've had 3 already. So again, why? Because colon cancer is not just the third leading cause of cancer death. It's 100% preventable. Why? Because every colon cancer comes from a polyp, and every polyp can be seen on a colonoscopy. So there's simply no reason to not know that. And that has to be weighed against the cost of the colonoscopy, both the financial cost and the risks, which are very low, but not zero. There's a risk that comes from electrolyte abnormalities and hypotension from the bowel prep. There's a risk from the sedation, and there's obviously a risk of bleeding or perforation that comes from the colonoscopy itself. Again, in a generally healthy person, those risks are so low that they're almost difficult to quantify, as evidenced by a recent New England Journal of Medicine paper that was a very anti-colonoscopy paper, which I won't get into because it's probably a little bit of a tangent. But what's interesting is, despite being a very anti-colonoscopy paper, this paper does a better job demonstrating the safety of colonoscopy than anything else. It just was a oddly designed experiment. So the biggest challenge with aggressive screening posture is the specificity problem, which is when you stack more and more modalities around these things, you're going to start finding things that aren't cancer. So MRI has a very high sensitivity. In English, that just means if a cancer is present, an MRI is very likely to see it. But it has a very low specificity, which means in English, it will see a bunch of things and think they are cancer when they are not. And it's most troubled by glandular tissue. So glandular tissue is the Achilles heel of MRI. And therefore, when you use, as we do, whole body MRI for cancer screening, we tell our patients going in, it's like a 25% chance we're going to find something that is not cancer, but will require us to do further investigation. If you're not cool with that, which is totally fine, we probably shouldn't do this. And again, most people are okay with that, but it helps to set that expectation going in, that you're going to probably be chasing your tail, looking at some stupid thyroid nodule that is absolutely nothing. I mean, I can't tell you how many useless thyroid nodules we've had to get ultrasounds on that prove to be absolutely nothing. But you have to follow them for a couple of years to make sure they're nothing.
What is the typical cost of a whole body MRI? And so for people who are not your patients, how would they go about getting those? Because I think most people's general practitioner is not going to script that out for them.
Correct. I don't know the short answer because I don't know how many different places are doing it. I can tell you that we use a couple of different facilities, and I should disclose that I'm a founder of one of them. But we use a scanner that probably we send our patients to anywhere they want to go, but within a certain company that we like. That's not a company I have an affiliation with, and I believe they're charging about $2,500.
Mm-hmm. Can you, since you don't have an affiliation, can you mention that? Because, for instance, you are not my physician, sadly, for me. And luckily for you. But I'd love to get a whole body MRI. So what is this company?
So the company that makes the MRI that we're using right now is called Prenuvo. I interviewed the chief technology officer and the head radiologist of that company on one of my podcasts. It's a super interesting technology based out of Vancouver. And for a long time, that was the only scanner in the world. So I had my first scan back in 2015. I went up to Vancouver to get it done. Probably had my first 2 up there. They've now opened locations all over the country. So they've got one in the Bay Area. They've probably got one here in LA. I know they have one in Dallas. So they've got them all over the place.
Great.
And then the company that I'm affiliated with is a different type of company that does all sorts of diagnostics. But among them is we have a Prenuvo scanner in that company. That company's called Biograph, and that's in the Bay Area.
Biograph,
yeah.
Spelled as one would expect.
Yep.
That's very helpful in terms of understanding the kind of general risk and ways to offset cancer to the extent that one can, and certainly what the consideration should be. Number 3 on the list of ways to die. We should just title this "Ways to Die," or we should title this "How Not to Die." Too early. Neurodegenerative disease. This is an area I'm somewhat familiar with, not because of my own experience, thankfully, but because of my relationship to the neuroscience community. And last time I checked, I was told that everyone experiences some age-related cognitive decline. So we all get less proficient at focus, memory, complex, context-dependent task switching, all that stuff as we get older. But it's the slope of that line that really can be controlled to some extent, and that Alzheimer's dementia represents just a steep acceleration, downward acceleration of all of that. That was what I was told. I'm guessing that even though I reside in I'm reside in that community, that some of that is being revised, especially with respect to the underlying causes of Alzheimer's, because there's a lot of controversy, even scandal around this whole APP, ApoB, amyloid plaque tangle stuff, which is the stuff of textbooks for medical students and neuroscience students. What is the story with neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's in particular? How can we offset it? And perhaps as importantly, how can we all slow